about two assumptions. There are some countries that Donald Trump and the Western power thinks that they are not supposed to be over the years they have proven not to be able to rule their people. And about the current polling in the US, where Democrats are described as historically unpopular and heading into a midterm cycle come November 2026, while woke cultural product lose audiences. Yet, survey continue to project democratic strength. The speaker asks whether the disconnect render the polls complete horses. This statement invites us to test assumption about regime legitimacy, the limits of external pressure or engagement, the reliability of opinion data versus market and behavior signals, and the relation between cultural trends and electoral outcome. We have outlined 10 questions to our guests. This program is sponsored by Solafide. We shall be coming back.
Solafide accounting software, empowering businesses across Africa. Managing your business finances shouldn't be complicated. Meet Solafide accounting software, an accounting and business management solution designed to help businesses work smarter, faster, and more efficiently. With Solafide, you can manage your accounting, payroll, employees, and business operations from one powerful platform. Built with OHADA-compliant accounting standards, Solafide is designed with African businesses in mind. Whether you're a small business, a growing company, or a large enterprise, Solafide gives you the tools you need to stay organized and make better business decisions. And with support for both English and French, plus online and offline access, your business can keep moving wherever you are. From financial management to payroll and employee records, Solafide brings your essential business processes together in one place. Solafide, simple, reliable, and built for your business. Solafide accounting software, empowering businesses across Africa.
Back for more details. I'm being joined by Mr. Tingon Ferdinand. Good day and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Theory, for discussing a lot of geopolitics is concerned. We'll be discussing things happening around the world. Some of them affect us directly, so we can stay at the geopolitics because whether we like it or not, it influences our lives.
So, what specific evidence or indicator will constitute acknowledgement by Iranians, Afghans, North Korean, or Cuban regime that they have failed to deliver a dignified life for their people? And why is that acknowledgement framed as a prerequisite for any rehabilitation?
Okay, it's an interesting question. If you look at how the world functions, there are some countries that are considered authoritarian countries, so they don't give liberty to their citizens. Some of them you have mentioned, like Iran, is a good point where you discover that there is no freedom of religion, as you can see. For example, 80% to 90% are obligated to follow Islam and so on. Apart from that, you can't speak the way you speak in America, where you can easily tell the president to go fuck himself. Sorry for using the F word, but then, and you will not be arrested. Or we see a contrast between the two worlds. One world, you can just get up and say whatever you want to say. We can't really guarantee whether your freedom thereafter is free, but then there's that liberty for you to express your mind. But in another world, either self-censorship or censorship by the government. That's the case of countries like Iran, countries like North Korea, Cuba, and many others, where the citizens are basically living as if they're in a lion's den, where the lions decide whatever happens.
Ancient civilization.
Yes, the case where the kings and emperors were ruling and they had the final say. And so, countries, there is a tendency for us to conclude that the way people are living there is not meeting the standard, because if you see the government doing something and you criticize the government, which is the government that we are supposed to live by the principle of democracy, they govern are answerable to following the contract principle, that if I'm your president, I'm a servant to serve us, not serving themselves. So these countries tend to seem as if they are kings and emperors. And presidents, when they speak up, some of them are even executed with that we will see. And so we see a country, and we see countries that people live below standard and nobody can complain. Basically want to survive. And so there are lots of, and so that is the argument that we're saying that we can say to an extent that their citizens are not living as the rest of the world. And so that is the point that we're making this argument.
Right. And I want to find out a country does not only have political structure, it aside human rights. So the question I want to find out, what measuring instrument has been used by the regime and know that they are not fit to govern a people?
First, we want to look at each country, those economic, social, political, maybe cultural. Now, let's look at them in terms of political. Let's keep political first. Political can be obvious, we already know. Let's take the economic aspect.
Like North Korea.
Yes, North Korea, it's a lot country, so we don't really have an in-depth knowledge of what happens. But the few videos and the few reporting you see shows that the people are barely living at the mercy of the
Produced by CNN, the propagandist media.
You may want to say there's propaganda, but then if it was a transparent and open country, they might not be able to have that. The people are living. You see, because we often see, take the case of Iran, just the starting of the crisis, so many people are being executed. So how do you now justify that CNN that is being a propaganda media? Yes, we understand how CNN can also be. We see, having been following politics since 2016, we see a lot of propaganda from the Western media. But we're now living in a new generation where it's difficult to hide. Even in North Korea, how you just mentioned, there are still ways that people get images out. And so you see a lot of execution of the people because they are trying to express their human right, and you see the starvation.
So now we are talking about the rehabilitating process to give them a chance. But the West says it's impossible to reach that potential.
No, it's a good idea, but I'm looking at
Iran.
Cuba,
Okay.
for example. Let's take a Cuba. If you look at Cuba or Venezuela, which is another country, especially this country that's socialist, they tend to seemingly, socialism says it's for everybody, but you never really find that everybody benefits from it. If you look at Iran, Cuba, and you see what is happening today, it is the Western desire to change this to be pro-Western values and principles. And so we see that even the war in Iran, as is currently being fight, I think when Donald Trump went to Iran, to Venezuela, and used his approach, he discovered that he could easily turn Venezuela to be a little bit pro-West and institute Western value, work with them so that they should be pro-America and the rest. So that mindset of maybe using the same approach, and how do I come to that conclusion? If you look at what they have done, the America had with Iran was a kind of good behavior will be rewarded. That was the principle of the memorandum. It said, okay, if you become friendly to the West, sponsoring terrorism in the whole of the Middle East, and maybe other parts of the world, then we'll unfreeze your asset, you'll join the world economy. And so that was a process. For me, many people criticize that, but I saw that was a kind of rehabilitation plan that the Trump regime or America was trying to implement.
We are talking about a country that has been under embargo since 1979, and since then has been coping with itself. Initially, the US put a halt on their nuclear weapon industrialization. And of recent, the vice president of the US, D.C. Vance, came out and struggled to maintain the level of gas production low. They lost control of their gas production. So the war now is a war oriented towards gas, and this statement cannot be withdrawn. So I want to see the gendarme that the US positioned itself to be, giving instruction, giving carrots, and whose civilization is acceptable on the table or not. And the reorientation of that nuclear weapon to gas management now. When did we switch from security to economic?
I think I always learn that giving a simple answer to a complex problem is also one. If you want to boil down the current, I'll use the word quagmire in Iran and the standoff between the US and Iran. So economics is playing a central role. Iran cannot withstand, which we can also discuss these things. Iran has gone through a lot since for the 47 years. But I always argue that one of the things that Iran did, Iran had an agenda. Presidents saw it, but nobody acted against it. Either they were afraid of the consequences, which is what Donald Trump is currently suffering from. What happened is that Iran has an ideology, and that's why it's difficult to overcome the desire to control the world. They want to be, let me use the word hegemon, as a Middle East concern. They want to control and, if possible, beyond the Middle East. And so, how did they operate? Building their military, missiles, and all sorts of animations, and we can see what they're doing. And the idea was that if we have enough production, if we can arm ourselves enough to an extent that no country can easily fight us without bearing a lot of loss, then we can determine what happens in the Middle East and beyond. And even Jimmy Carter, I think, saw it. Trump, in his first term, saw it, tried to do something but couldn't.
That's the Nazis movement that wanted to fight the communists.
Yeah.
So, previous president of the US saw the Iranians' hegemony on construction, but remained silent. Just as in Western Europe in 1931, before they saw the struggle of the communists trying to take over with the USSR, former Russia, and they sat quiet until they saw a stooge. Hitler was a stooge they could use and manipulate. Western civilization equally saw Donald Trump as a stooge they could manipulate, and they allowed him now to come to office. And now, these are the consequences we are living just 2 years into this month.
Now, before we look at, if we look at what happened, the rise of the Hitler government has been prevented.
Right.
Yes, but nobody thought it was a serious threat.
No, they were using it to quench a revolution, just as you are trying to tell us that they are using Donald Trump to quench the Iranian revolution.
Now, again, let's understand something. There is always intended consequences and unintended consequences for every action. Now, if you look at what happened in the you discovered that we had the USSR, present the Russia, and maybe some parts of
Yugoslavia.
And it was a threat. It was spreading their ideology and socialism and communism and all of that. And the Western government initially did not take it serious. It started growing and growing. People like Stanley, I think they came up. And so Hitler was not really a direct response. Hitler was an ideologue. So he basically wanted Germany to become a powerful nation.
Just like Donald Trump today. Yes. But now in Donald Trump, I do not really want us to over-level there because...
the issue is that the past 7 presidents, let's try to conclude, they saw it that Iran was a threat, but they were afraid because of their political capital. But Donald Trump came in and he's using his political capital to do a correction. Now, some people have argued that Iran just wants to be independent, like North Korea, because you look at North Korea, have nuclear weapons, and so nobody can just harass North Korea. But there are 2 things to underscore, or there's something important for us to note here. What North Korea is not trying to conquer the world. North Korea is not trying to take over South Korea, take over Guam and all the other parts of the world that they have the possibility. But that's not the same ideology that the Islamic Republic has. The Islamic Republic, using their Shia principle and their law, or the jihadist kind of ideology, feels that for us to exist, everybody should either become a Muslim or follow their religious practices. And so they have a kind of utopic world that they want to live in. And if we want to compare the 2 situations, the 1945 Wahala and the USSR and this one, I think that they share something in common. But we also want to look at how we allow North Korea to get to where it is, which is not a major threat.
Let's come back to our conversation.
Before we get back there. So I've tried to analyze the situation and say, okay, maybe Iran just wants to be like North Korea, where they are not threatened, because it seems like when you have a nuclear weapon, you are relatively safe. But then that is not what is happening, because Iran has been actively sponsoring terrorist groups in the Middle East. We have Hamas, sponsored by Iran. We have the Houthis. We have the Hezbollah, and so many others. So they are not the same, and we cannot treat them the same and say, no, this is just somebody who wants to be free. The Western
it doesn't end there.
Always come.
Religiously, they are behind the Sharia.
Yes, I think religion plays a major role.
Yes,
with the ideology. That's why they can even die.
Your analysis seems very biased, and I understand why you say what is Tehran next move? And it's the US that is winning the struggle. But I have four hypotheses for that. I might take it subsequently, but I have some few questions here I must run. Historically, have any authoritarian or theocratic regime undergone meaningful internal reform or rehabilitation without first publicly admitting systemic failure? What lesson, if any, do these cases offer to us?
From the onset of nations, we can go back to, I think, the Westphalia Treaty, where nations became. When a country comes out and we want to be pro-communism or kind of, we don't have instances where they will somehow, by their own desire, say, let's move away from socialism, even though it's very destructive. The issue is that what socialism actually does is that it creates a kind of a class system where we have those who are at the top, they live large at the expense of everybody. And so when those at the top start eating at the animal farm, where those at the top, once they're happy, they think that the rest of the world is happy. And so that is how socialism. So these people now, it becomes very typical for them to make a change. So you will not want to see Iran will hardly change its ideology from internal reaction. No Venezuela, no Cuba, no North Korea. Only an external force can change. And that's the same thing that the USSR, they needed to be pressure that led to the disintegration of the whole, I don't know whether we call it country, to confederation, that's the right word, to smaller states that we have now, like Ukraine is a fallout, and so many Serbia and the rest. So I don't think that we can say that there is a country that from within will get up and say, no, let's move away from socialism and embrace democracy.
Right. So to you, historically, there's no authoritarian system that openly denounce failure of management and so request for rehabilitation.
Exactly.
Now, what concrete metrics? GDP per capita, life expectancy, freedom indices, immigration rate, best measure whether a regime has failed to thrive, and how do the cited regime currently score on those metrics relatively to peers? When we talk of GDP per capita, life expectancy, does that not mean that so many African countries will have been under the list, even though they have signed democratic treaties?
It's a call for concern that we are living in Africa. You have mentioned the issue of immigration. You've mentioned GDP and human rights and many others.
Life expectancy.
If we limit ourselves to these four aspects, let's look at GDP. Most of these countries have the lowest GDP.
Iran, people live well in Iran than in most African countries.
Yes, that's why I'm saying that most of these countries, which means African countries, should normally be in the list, because how many African countries truly practice democracy? Now, we may also debate the concept of democracy, because for me, I don't even consider America a democratic country.
So the question actually is, with an easy lifestyle for their citizens.
Since we're discussing geopolitics, I want us to look at something again from a wider dimension. Now, look at the world as a piece of cake. And so everybody wants to have a share in that piece of cake. We have those who think that I have the largest share and decide whatever happens to the remaining part. And so, what am I saying? We have the US or the Western world that they think that they can police the world, led by the US, and decide what happens as values and principles. On the other hand, we have China. China's ideology is not ready to police the world, but they want to police the world in not the way the US is doing.
is to occupy the space US and Russian policing are creating.
No, it's not really about yes. That's why we say if you look at it as a cake, everybody's struggling to occupy. And if you look at it also from that dimension, you understand Donald Trump's foreign policy. What happens is that when America has been enjoying the hegemony role, making the world a unipolar system for too long, but for the last 20 years, it made a lot of mistakes, starting with accepting China to join the World Trade Organization. And that helped China to open up its economy. And because of the trade advantage, the economy of China grew very fast. And China now currently is a threat to that monopoly or hegemony role of the US. So many past presidents have thought of confronting it again, but only Donald Trump came out and said, well, why should I allow China to control the world production? For instance, during COVID, it was difficult to get basic needs in America. Everything is done from China, and China was completely locked down. So that became a whole threat to America and the world in general. And so Donald Trump comes in and says, okay, how do I maintain this global dominance of America? First, I'll need to box China into one end. How can I box China into one end? This is geopolitics now in real life. First, one of the things that controls the world is oil. And so China gets most of the oil from this so-called socialist country. We have Venezuela, we have Iran, or countries that are not friendly to the West. And so the first approach that Trump had to do was to say, okay, I'll attack Venezuela, right? And make it pro-West. In that case, I can control what the whole world system runs, which is oil. That was successful for Venezuela. He looked the next place where there is a lot of oil and have a lot of influence was we have Iran. And so when you look at Iran is not only because they're trying to get nuclear weapon, which we have already established, that is one of the ideologies. But the second thing is that Iran also produces a lot of oil. So Trump's ideology was, if I take out the leadership, maybe they could easily fall and become pro-West. In which case now, I will maintain global dominance as oil is concerned, and dollar value will remain strong, and I can influence a lot of what happens across the group. That was his ideology.
We've been 25 minutes into this discussion. You will permit me to take you to the second part. We initially introduced the conversation around two major poles. The first one regarding these four margin countries who are seeking validation in the table of democratic practices. And the second one that has to do...
Everything that they want to be validated.
Yes.
It's the Western world that says that they're not valid, and we should make them valid.
Good. So actors in the US, sorry, we just had power failure. This is Africa for us. We're measuring countries that are relatively free, these countries that the West want to dictate their policies to. So the second statement, what data sources document that Democrats are the least popular they have ever been, now never been so broke, heading into a midterm cycle, and how do those figures compare with previous cycles?
Okay, when we look at this is American politics in particular right now, one of the things we see is that America has only two political parties. We have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. And what happens is that if you look at the whole practices, what we have observed is that over the years, the ruling party often loses during the midterms, and that has been like that for the past 50 years. But then the current situation seems funny because the Democratic Party or the Democrat Party have a very low approval rate. I think they are in their 20s, and that's the lowest it has been from one poll to another. We even witness something that is coming out from their system, which is now, we call it the socialist arm of the Democratic Party. And so there is a socialism that's also coming out in America, which the America is struggling to fight in other parts of the world. But then, do we think that the Democrats will win the midterms election to take over the House and the Senate? And we are thinking that there are a few things we must consider. First, if they will be able to win, then the Iran war has to play a major role. The oil prices have been very high, caused by the Iran war, and so making Trump to be very unpopular. The second factor that during they're running a primaries now, and they're taking a lot of extreme ideologies, those who are sharing, they will call it the socialist views. And we think that the socialist view may work well for local elections. They might not be able to take them across the bar because they become unpopular, and not many Americans want to turn into socialism. Although we see the youths who are complaining that we are unable to afford basic needs, we cannot buy a home, getting a home is unrealistic to many of the youth, and so they're driving towards socialism. But then we see one thing that is very important to tell us how the Democratic Party is, that they're currently minus as money is concerned. I think they have around I don't know, it's 2 million. Yes, after burning 2 billion in the previous election, which they lost. The Republican Party is going in much favored in terms of resources in the coffers. So if we go by the fact that elections are influenced by money, then there's high probability. So there's high probability that the Republican will maintain, especially the Senate. They may lose the Congress or the lower house, but they will maintain the Senate. There's high probability in that. However, all of that is pivot or linked but to what happens with external policy. The current economic situation in America is not the best. There is always this concept which says that is the economic.
Trump was voted by two major powers.
Yes.
One were the Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
That the tax policies, but followers are very positive. They have had enormous action. Brief. The only problem with them is that they are not ready to see part of their money being wasted fighting a war that is in so many kilometers. They never really predicted that. Then the second group,
Yes,
before you take the floor, are the Christian traditionalists who same-sex and other practices that was taking America far again. And again, they also are okay, but for the fact that the war in the Middle East was never part of their agenda. Instead, it is worsening the reinforcement of the religious belief they wanted to implant. So is it that you don't see these two indicators?
No. There are two things that we should take note of when it comes to politics, when it comes to winning elections. Economy and foreign policy plays a key role. Now, Trump has done well on the social aspect, fighting DAI, the rise of extreme groups like same sex for everybody. We have women playing, men playing in women's sports.
Yes.
Feminism, it's not, I don't really want to put it like feminism, but just saying there is no wood. We can't define a woman before.
Okay.
Men playing in women's sports, men present in women's locker rooms and things like that. But that he has done well. The second thing is immigration. Most Americans want immigration, but they want legal immigration. They think that coming in should be something that you should be vetted to see if you like the country, you share the values and principles. Except that those are the same things that the Democratic Party or Democrat Party wants. They don't care where you come from. You can come in whether you're a criminal or not. And so Trump has struggled, Trump has succeeded on the ideology to an extent. You can freely worship. There is no censorship as it was during the Biden administration. You have the tendency, before you go to America now, you are vetted to an extent. There is no illegal immigration as before. But one thing that always defines people's action is their stomach. People feel that Trump has not done well in the economy, given his global tariffs principle, which has caused a lot of
which China has taken advantage of, because that's what I was trying to explain before. Trump is losing on four different diagonal prism that was never part of his agenda. You know, at the level of his tax policy, when he created the high tax policy, other countries were just going to submit to him, forgetting that China was there just like a smuggler. As you follow up yourself, and the people are looking for, especially in most African and the Middle East countries. As Trump went up, and they were retracting themselves, China immediately came in and became the next partner. And for America to come back again. So those jobs now that were previously for American are gone.
Let me comment. When a situation is complex and we give a short solution to it, we turn up to always wrong. Now, America is 40 trillion in debt, and many Americans have not evaluated why is our government so indebted. It's because of the previous policies. I think if there is one thing Trump has done, is that Trump has created a kind of reawareness or awareness of the current realities of American economy. There is nobody consumes more than he or she produces and survive long term. America has lived for so long on services. They ignore production, China and other parts of the world like Taiwan and the rest. And before then, it was profitable. That's why we have trillionaires, people who are living that. But the drawback was that since production became low within the country, they were importing a lot and had to be printing money too. It caused the dollar to, one, lose its value. Secondly, to depend on foreign countries for home products. And Trump came in and said, okay, one way to become a dominant power is when you are independent. You can have all what you want and don't over rely on external, especially on critical issues. And how do I bring back production into the country? The only way for me to bring back production into the country is to make importing expensive and to make home production cheaper.
We know about the tax policy. If you run us
to explain, to establish this. And so that is the first principle he was operating. That for me to influence, to make America strong again or great again, is to bring back production. So one of the ways is taxation. Now, has it created a gap in the global? Yes, it has created. But I also want to say something, apart from the policies, there is something that the whole world and even America needs to come to realization. Before now, the AI is one of the highest things that have caused a change. And Americans think that they can continue to enjoy what they've enjoyed before. No. Before now, America influenced world politics. Only CNN, we only listen to CNN, we have social media.
And the declining mainstream media audiences, we observable market signals, box office performance of woke films, donor reports against published polling that shows democratic strength, methodological critics of each type of evidence.
Okay, now, like I was saying, I think the question links directly to what I was trying to establish. If we look keenly into how the world functioned 10 years or 20 years before now, we know that what we knew that was right was coming from CNN, SMBC, and the rest. And so they had control. So they could tell you what is false. We are now seeing what Fauci did during COVID because of social media. And that censorship, let me use the word censorship of information, gave America a lot of power. Now, another thing that's happened is the coming of AI has decentralized knowledge. The same concepts and principles Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and used to group Microsoft and all the other companies to global giants. That knowledge is available across the world. And so America cannot continue to think that they will live as before. They must come to a realization that knowledge is not limited. Information now is available. You cannot hide. You try to do something, somebody shares it online, and everybody becomes aware. And so social media has given a lot of power even to a common man. In Cameroon, you don't necessarily need CRTV to know what is happening in the country. No, do you need what? BBC to know what is happening across the world. And so there is a dynamic that is taking place that all countries, including even African countries, are coming to a realization that we can build our own system and we can equally stand on our own on so many aspects without necessarily depending on the West.
That's right. If commercial failure of certain media and cultural products that necessarily imply corresponding electoral weakness for Democratic Party, or can the two diverge? What mechanism or
We are talking two things here: commercial failure of the social media or of the mainstream media. I think Trump created the word fake news. And so whatever the mainstream media report, you need to double check because it might be fake. That is the principle. And so that has seen a declining interest Also, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, and all, they are very much glued to their phones, so they receive this information. However, when it comes to elections, even all parties now are currently using all these platforms. They are on X, they are on Twitter, they are on TikTok trying to sell their ideology. So they still have the potential to lead to meet their voters. And so what I said is that they need money to be able to get there. If they can have the money, they will be fine. And the second thing is that if Trump keeps performing poorly, his approval rating is poor, but also the quality of candidates that they are going to run will influence their success or failure, because beyond all, the candidates should not have baggage or that will send people away. If we have more moderate Democrats, then they are highly likely to win the Senate and the House. But if we have extremists, they may sell at the local level, but might not be able to. What is historical midterm or election cycle narrative and the grassroots economic? A good. And how those gaps resolve presidential election in America. If you look at the election in America, will win. Yeah. And we got up in the morning to see that Donald Trump, who we don't consider gone out of the political scene, became president for the second time. And so most pollsters were surprised. I think for a good number of reasons. First, I was very optimistic, knowing that having come right to where I saw that Kamala, she was not very electable. Yes, which was, yeah, I think that she was weak. If the Democratic Party did well to select somebody who was also who could represent, who could speak, then I think they would have. But much more. The question whether Biden actually supported her. Never wanted to answer that question. Yeah, there is what we call the danger of being in power and running for power. And JD Vance or whoever will take over Trump will face. Yeah, that's what he's saying. And we don't know whether Vance will actually be the one, but there's high probability that he will be. But Vance will have a challenge. And what will be the challenge? He will need to campaign for himself and against Trump. And that becomes very difficult because they will say, okay, you promised us no war, and you went to Iran. Biden did not campaign against Obama, but Biden campaigned against Trump because Trump was
Ruling picture is indeed complete horses. What alternative forecasting methods or data stream, early voting, registration trends, small donor pattern, consumer sentiment, betting markets will provide a more reliable picture of midterm prospects? And how should those be weighted relative to traditional polls?
Okay, that is very interesting question. And if you are working for a political party and to know the true state of what is happening, you don't need to use a single outlet to gather your information. Don't rely only on polls. Polling markets and others are available. Donations, especially little donations, are very good indicators of people's sentiment.
Some people say that's
And
what even
also-
made Trump to win last year, thanks to Elon's donation.
I think Elon's donation was quite rich.
Okay.
Yes, and he plays
It's an outlier.
Yes, he was an outlier, spending close to 350 million. Seems to be the highest ever spent by a single party or person on a campaign. But what happens is that at the end of the day, as a geostrategist and discussing these issues, what I take from the discussion thus far is that we'll continue to police the world for some time. And,
So you are not part of those who are seeing the fall of the Western civilization.
no, no.
It's a mirage.
It's a mirage. If there are so many factors that
Dollar
interplay.
value is dropping to petroleum interests, and Middle East countries have not given up. Israel is moving their support behind the US. Finally, US finds itself in the middle of a war. Now, two pillar supports are with the leadership, nor the historical support coming from the Middle East, that was Israel. At the end of the day, you are not seeing the fall of the Western civilization.
No, that will be giving again a quick solution to a very complex issue.
That have been coming up for the future.
Yes, when it comes to geopolitics, there are so many moving parts. When people say there is no support between America and Israel, I think that
it's dropping. The last statement, and that's why I said we cannot contain that within this live edition, but we shall be coming back to talk about it.
But then, before we go, I want to say this. America's supremacy remains undisputed for the next 20 years. But thereafter, I doubt. Maybe 20 years might be long, given the availability,
So what are you saying?
The advent of AI. Now, America has enjoyed hegemony for close to 70 years, but that is drifting away, either by its own policies or other external factors. The rise of China, the weakening of Europe is nowhere to be found in global affairs. When it comes to geopolitics, they may have a lot of population, but I think that the relationship with the US is also somehow not very stable. But then, America still controls a lot of what happens in the world in terms of technology, in terms of influence, in terms of ideology, in terms of perspective, they're still driving. However, we need to watch out for what AI and other technologies are doing. America will lose one of what it used to control the world.
And that takes us to the end of this elder edition, this maiden edition of Eating Right from Cameroon, Central Africa. Feminine guest for that matter. We want to thank you for making this edition possible.
Thank you very much, and I hope that our viewers would have learned something, and we call upon them to subscribe so that anytime we are live, they will join us.
We started anticipating on the current Tehran Washington conflict, and we said that would be. So, what are you promising to viewers for the next?
I think in our upcoming, we'll discuss the stalemate or the quagmire between Iran and the US. We'll also look at the Israel-American relationship, which is very important, and we will look at the Europe-American relationship, and then maybe China. Those are geopolitical issues that we need to be discussing them. They're very vital and they affect our life right here in Cameroon. So that is where we'll be going next.
That makes it for this edition. It's been Cyril, the man. I'll be yours again. Until then, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.